My son kicked me out of the house like I was a nobody. But what he didn't know was I was hiding $2 million, and I was watching everything. I didn't shout, didn't cry. I just picked up the suitcase he packed for me, like I was some old tenant behind on rent. No hug, no goodbye. Just the words, "You don't live here anymore," and a door that closed in my face. That's how 43 years of fatherhood ended. On a Tuesday, after lunch. I'm James Harlan. Most people just call me Jimmy. Born and raised outside Topeka, Kansas. Quiet place, long winters, the kind of town where folks wave from porches even if they don't know you. I grew up with grease under my nails and calluses I wore like medals. Spent my life as a diesel mechanic. Honest work, long days, cold beer after shift. I raised Mark, my only son, to work hard, speak straight, and never forget who came before him. I thought I did all right by him. Until the day he looked me in the eye and threw me out like I'd overstayed my welcome. Stay with me till the end. And if this story reminds you of something, if you've ever felt discarded, betrayed, or treated like a burden, leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too. After my wife Carol passed 5 years ago, things shifted. She was the glue, the one who kept Sunday dinners civil and Christmas mornings full of warmth. After she was gone, Mark said I shouldn't live alone, that I needed support. He offered his home like a son doing the right thing. At first, it felt like a blessing. But over time I could feel the tension, the silent sighs, the rolled eyes from his wife Lisa, the comments that weren't quite jokes. "Shouldn't you be in bed by now, Dad? You really used all the hot water again?" And then, one day, the jokes stopped. The kindness dried up. Mark called me into the kitchen and handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a lease termination. For me. The house I helped him fix, where I repainted his kid's nursery with these same tired hands. I was now no longer a good fit. "You'd be more comfortable somewhere with full-time care," he said. "It's for the best." I didn't argue, just nodded. I'd learned long ago that silence can cut deeper than shouting. I left with a suitcase he packed, a jacket I grabbed from the back of the chair, and one thing he didn't pack because he didn't know it existed: the truth. You see, about 20 years ago, I bought a patch of land behind an old junkyard, just rocks and dirt. Paid $4,000 for it in cash. Everyone thought I was crazy, but something in my gut told me to hold on to it, and I did. Last year, a tech company bought the entire area to build a data center. They offered me $2.1 million. I said yes, but told them to wait on the transfer. I wanted to see something first. I wanted to know if I still mattered without the money. Now I had my answer. That first night, I slept in a motel off the highway. Cheap sheets, buzzing lights, the kind of place no one asks questions. I drank burnt lobby coffee from the only thing I took that mattered. An old mug Carol gave me the day we opened the garage together. On the bottom, faded in black marker. "Proud of you, Jimmy." That mug had seen more life than most people ever will. I sat there in that stale room, looking at that cup, and I didn't feel sad. I felt clear. People don't always show you who they are when things are good. They show you when they think you have nothing. The next morning, I opened a cashier's check for $10,000, just enough to rent a small place and breathe. The rest of the money stayed untouched, hidden, quiet, like me. Mark never called. Lisa blocked my number. I didn't chase them. I cooked my own meals, watched baseball alone, and started fixing radios for neighbors who still said, "Thank you." I built a new rhythm. Not flashy, not grand, just mine. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from a law office. Not mine, his. Apparently, Mark needed a co-signer for a massive loan. His voice hadn't trembled when he kicked me out, but now he was drowning. And he had no idea what I'd been hiding all along. And what happened the next day, well, that changed everything. There's this old coffee mug I've had since 1983. It's chipped on the handle, stained inside no matter how much you scrub it. White with a blue ring around the top. Carol gave it to me the day I opened my own little garage, Harlan Auto and Diesel. She wrote on the bottom with a black marker, "Proud of you, Jimmy." You can barely read it now, but I still know it's there. I took that mug with me when I left Mark's house. It was the only thing I made sure to pack myself. Everything else, the suitcase, the clothes, he or Lisa must have thrown in without much thought. But that mug, that was mine. That was years of mornings with calloused hands and early starts, the smell of gasoline still on my shirt. That mug saw more than most people did. Funny thing, when you lose everything, the smallest objects start talking to you. I remember sitting in that little motel room, first night after the eviction, pouring myself burnt lobby coffee into that chipped mug, holding it like it could explain what had just happened. And I remember saying out loud, to nobody but that ceramic piece of my past, so this is what it feels like, to be old and in the way. Carol would have never let this happen. She had a way of keeping people human. She softened Mark, back when he still listened. When she died, something in him hardened, like a house that loses its furnace in the middle of winter. Cold crept into every room. When Mark was little, he used to sit on my lap with that very same mug between his hands, pretending to drink coffee like Dad. He'd ask me questions like, "Why do engines need oil?" Or, "Do you think I'll grow a beard like you?" And I'd tell him, "Only if you earn it." It was a joke, but now I wonder if he took it the wrong way. Maybe he's still trying to prove something. People ask how a son becomes a stranger. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not one argument or one mistake. It's years of unspoken words, little disappointments, buried resentment. It's forgetting birthdays, missing dinners, dodging real conversations. Until one day you're just two people sharing a roof. And then not even that. There's a moment I keep replaying. The day I helped him fix up his first car. A rusted '98 Civic that barely started. He was 17, all attitude and cheap cologne. I stayed up all night ordering the parts online, spent the whole weekend in the garage with him. When it finally roared back to life, he hugged me, real tight. Like he meant it. That was the last time he hugged me without a holiday forcing it. I still see that boy sometimes. In my dreams. I talk to him, tell him stories about his mother, ask him why he grew so far from the man I thought he'd be. He never answers, just stares back, quiet. I'm not perfect. Lord knows I've said things I shouldn't. I pushed him hard, wanted him to be strong. Maybe I confused strength with silence. Maybe I should have told him I was proud of him more. But I never thought he'd confuse money with love, or home with power. Now I sit in this small apartment, with my old recliner and a used TV from the thrift store, and I drink from that same mug every morning. It's the first thing I touch when I wake up, like it's checking if I'm still here. And sometimes I wonder if Mark ever thinks about me, about what he did. You know what's strange? That lawyer who called about the co-signing, he didn't know Mark had kicked me out, thought we were still close, said he was desperate to keep the house, mentioned foreclosure. I didn't say much, just listened, took down the number, and I started to feel something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not even revenge, something colder, quieter, a kind of power that comes when people think you're powerless. I haven't decided what I'll do yet, whether I'll call back, whether I'll show up. But I opened my drawer this morning, found that folder with the cashier's checks still inside, uncashed, untouched, over $2 million sitting silent, waiting, like they know. And then I saw something else in the drawer, folded in an envelope I didn't recognize. Carol's handwriting on the front. It just said, "For Jimmy, when the time comes." I stared at that envelope for a long time before I even touched it. Carol's handwriting. It stopped my breath. Her letters always had this softness to them, like each stroke of the pen carried a bit of her voice. Neat cursive, slanted just enough to feel warm. She used to leave me little notes in my lunchbox. Things like, "Don't forget to smile today," or "Soup's in the thermos, not the can." But this felt different. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly faded. She must have written it long before she got sick. Before the doctor's words turned into whispers we couldn't say out loud. Before hospital rooms replaced Sunday drives and quiet mornings together. I held the envelope like it might vanish if I blinked. For Jimmy, when the time comes. She always knew more than she said. She could feel storms before they came. Not the kind you see in the sky, the kind that build inside people. I used to think I was the strong one, the one holding everything together. But truth is, Carol was the anchor, the compass. She saw the cracks long before I did. I opened the letter with hands that shook more than I'd like to admit. Inside, just 2 pages, folded twice, no date. It started like this. Jimmy, if you're reading this, something has shifted. Maybe something broke. Maybe life pulled you into one of those lonely corners you never thought you'd see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you never have to open this. But if you did, then the time came. I stopped reading, sat back, let her voice echo in my head. I could almost smell her shampoo. That lavender one she always said was too expensive, but still bought anyway. I could hear her humming in the kitchen, barefoot on the linoleum, stirring something in a pot just to keep her hands busy. Then I kept reading. I know our son, Jimmy. I've seen the way he looks for love in the wrong places. He's always been hungry for something, and I worry that one day he'll forget where he came from. Or worse, try to rewrite it. She was right. She always was. But you carry everything quietly. You break your back for people and say it's no big deal. You ache in silence. I've watched you hide pain in coffee mugs and under truck hoods, and I just want you to know, if they turn on you one day, you're still not alone. I had to stop again. My chest tightened. I've cried maybe 5 times in the last 20 years. One was when my brother died. One was when Mark was born. The rest, well, most of them involved Carol. And now this letter. Don't let bitterness grow in you, even if they deserve it. Especially if they do. You have something most men your age lost a long time ago. A good heart. Use it wisely. She ended the letter with, and one more thing. I know you probably kept that land. I saw the paperwork once. Don't act surprised. You always said it was worthless, but something told me it wouldn't be someday. If that day came, and if you're hurting, then maybe it's time to stop fixing everyone else's engines and fix something for yourself. Go build a life again, Jimmy. Even if it's small, even if it's quiet. Love always, Carol. I folded the letter slowly, like it was made of glass. Sat there in that worn recliner, holding my breath, wondering how she always knew the exact words I'd need, years after she was gone. She was right about Mark. He used to be a good boy. Sensitive. Overly so. I remember once, he cried when he found a bird with a broken wing in our backyard. Begged me to save it. We drove 30 minutes to a vet. He named it Blue. But somewhere between that little boy and the man who tossed me out like an old sofa, something cracked. Carol saw it coming. I didn't. I stayed up all night after reading that letter. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't eat. Just sat with that envelope on my lap, like it was a map I hadn't read yet. Her words stirred something in me. Not anger, not revenge. Direction. A reason. A compass reappearing after I thought I'd lost it at sea. The next morning, I pulled out a spiral notebook and a pen. No grand plans, no schemes. Just a title on the first page. If I had $2 million and nothing left to prove. And then I just wrote. Things I never gave myself permission to imagine. Things Carol would have smiled at. I wrote about buying a plot of land by the lake, about building a small workshop, about inviting the neighbor kids over and teaching them how to fix bikes. I wrote about starting over, not to show Mark anything, but to show me I still could. Then my phone rang. It hadn't rung in days. And when I picked it up, it was Mark, but not like before. This time, he was crying. I hadn't heard Mark cry since he was 13. Back then, it was because his best friend moved away, and he didn't know how to say goodbye. That kind of crying had innocence in it. But what I heard on the phone that morning, it wasn't innocent. It was heavier, cracked with shame, like the sound of a man whose world was caving in and he'd finally run out of excuses. He didn't say hello, just said, "Dad, I need you." I didn't speak right away. I didn't know how. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that still hadn't gone out. My first instinct was to hang up, I'd been doing just fine without his voice filling my ears. But something in me, maybe Carol's words still echoing, made me stay. I finally said, "What happened?" He sniffled. I messed up, Dad. That much was clear. He told me about the loan. How he'd taken a second mortgage on the house, without telling Lisa, to invest in some cryptocurrency startup his college buddy was raving about. Promised returns, fast cash, early retirement, you know the type. Said the market crashed last week, and now the bank was closing in. Lisa had just found out. She was packing her things, threatening to take the kids and move to her sister's in Idaho. He said, "I've got 2 weeks before they take the house. I don't have anyone else." That last line stuck with me. I don't have anyone else. It hit like a slow slap across the face. Not because it was true, but because he believed it. After everything, after pushing me out, boxing up my life and telling me to go be someone else's problem, now he was back with empty hands and a trembling voice. I sat there, holding the phone in one hand and Carol's letter in the other. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to forgive. But most of me just sat silent, stuck between memory and reality. He kept talking, words tumbling over each other like he was trying to drown out the guilt with noise. Said he'd tried everything, called the bank, begged them, even tried to sell his truck. Nothing worked. He said, "I'm not asking for a handout, Dad. Just help me not lose everything." Everything. It was strange hearing him say that, because when he kicked me out, I lost everything. My space, my rhythm, my dignity. And he called it what's best. Now that the tide had turned, he suddenly understood what losing meant. I told him I needed to think, that I'd call him back. He sounded surprised. "Wait, you're not going to help me?" I didn't answer that, just said, "I'll call you tomorrow, Mark." Then I hung up. I spent that whole night pacing my small apartment. The clock ticked louder than usual. The fridge made that humming noise like it was trying to fill the silence. I kept rereading Carol's letter, especially that line, "Don't let bitterness grow in you, even if they deserve it." She always knew I had a tendency to hold things in, to let resentment marinate in me until it hardened. But this wasn't just bitterness. This was betrayal. And forgiveness didn't come easy when someone had slammed the door on you and left you to figure out the rest. Still, I thought about that boy with the broken bird, about the afternoons we used to sit on the back porch drinking root beer and watching lightning bugs, about how proud he looked when he brought home his first paycheck from the grocery store, how he insisted on buying me a steak with it. Said, "It's your money anyway, Dad. I just earned it back." Where did that boy go? I think about that a lot. Maybe the world chipped away at him. Maybe I did. Or maybe he just stopped hearing what love sounds like when it's quiet. Because that's how I love, quiet, steady, like a truck engine that runs best when nobody's watching. The next morning, I made coffee, used that old chipped mug again, sat by the window and watched the sun crawl over the trees. And then I did something I hadn't done since Carol died. I prayed. I didn't say much, just sat there, holding the mug, whispering, "Lord, I don't know what to do with him, but you do." After a long pause, I picked up the phone and called the number Mark had used. He picked up on the first ring. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept. "Dad," I said, "let's meet in person, tonight, at the diner. You know the one." He said, "Okay." That evening, I walked into Miller's Diner, the same one Carol and I used to go to every Thursday for pie. The bell above the door still jingled the same way, smelled like burnt toast and old grease. I saw Mark sitting in a booth, looking smaller than I remembered. His hair was messier, shirt wrinkled. He looked like someone who'd been carrying too much weight with too little strength. I sat down across from him, didn't say a word. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Bank documents. Numbers circled in red. Big ones. Then he looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my son. Not the man who pushed me out. Not the man who got greedy. Just my boy. And he said something I'll never forget. "If you don't help me, I understand. If you don't help me, I understand." He said it with eyes downcast, like he didn't believe in the words himself, like he'd rehearsed them on the way over but hoped deep down that I'd interrupt, that I'd swoop in with a warm hand and a rescue. But I didn't. I just sat there, letting him sit with the silence. Sometimes silence is the only mirror people ever get. The waitress came by and asked if we wanted anything. I ordered coffee. He said nothing, just shook his head. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days, but maybe shame was heavier than hunger. I stirred my coffee slowly, took a sip, let the heat settle behind my ribs before I finally said, "So you finally found rock bottom?" He nodded. No excuses, no defense. Just a slow, tired nod. I looked at the papers he'd slid across the table. Big red numbers, overdue payments. A foreclosure date circled with urgency. And on the final page, a desperate loan application. Denied. That kind of paperwork doesn't lie. But I'd learned a long time ago that numbers are just part of the story. The rest? That's what shows up in someone's face. And Mark, he looked like a boy trying to wear a man's coat, one that didn't quite fit anymore. I said, "You didn't call me because I'm your father. You called because I'm your last option." He didn't argue. That's what hurt the most, that he knew it was true. I didn't raise my voice, didn't lecture. I just looked at him and said the hardest sentence I've ever had to say. "You took me out of your life when I was still in it. Now you want me back because of what I might have, not who I am." That one landed. I could tell. He flinched, then looked out the window like he couldn't stand to meet my eyes. The diner buzzed with the low hum of conversation and silverware, but around us it felt like everything had gone still. I took the check, not the one from the bank, but the one the waitress left. Paid for my coffee and whatever he didn't order. Left a tip big enough to make someone smile. Then I stood up. Before I walked away, I said one more thing. "You said you understand if I don't help. That's good, because I haven't decided yet." He looked up like he was going to speak. I raised my hand, not angry, just firm, and said, "Not here. Not now." I walked out without looking back. That night, I sat at home with the folder open in front of me. The cashier's checks still untouched. $2 million waiting like a loaded gun. Power in the wrong hands, salvation in the right ones. I stared at them like they might blink or whisper an answer. But all I heard was my own breathing. I pulled out Carol's letter again. Read it for the 5th time. That line, "Go build a life again, Jimmy, even if it's quiet," kept ringing louder than all the rest. I kept thinking, what if the real test wasn't whether I could forgive Mark, but whether I could live without letting his choices define the rest of my life? Around midnight, I pulled out a clean envelope, wrote a number down on a small index card, folded it, slipped it into the envelope. No name, just a simple note. This is not a rescue. This is a reminder. The next morning, I drove to Mark's house. The same house I used to fix, the one I painted the porch railings on, the one I rewired the garage light for. It looked different now, smaller, like when you return to a childhood school and realize the desks were never that big. I walked up to the mailbox and dropped in the envelope. Didn't ring the bell, didn't want a conversation, just left it there, like a breadcrumb on a road I wasn't sure I'd walk again. Inside that envelope was a cashier's check for exactly $2,1043.18, the amount past due on the loan documents he showed me. No more, no less. I drove home, windows down, wind on my face. Carol's old country gospel CD playing low, and for the first time in months, I felt light. That night, Mark called again. This time, I didn't answer, and the voicemail he left. I still haven't deleted it. His voice was shaky, low, not like before, not desperate, not begging, just small. "Dad, I got the envelope. I don't even know what to say." I stared at that check for 10 minutes. "I thought maybe you were sending a message, but I'm not sure I understand it yet. But I want to. I really do. I miss you, Dad. I miss how things used to be. Please call me back. Please." Then it cut out. No long goodbye. No I love you. Just that word, please, stretched out at the end like a frayed rope. I sat there with the phone in my hand, screen still glowing, replaying his message 3 times. Not because I needed to hear the words again, but because I needed to hear the space between them, the pauses, the weight, the parts he couldn't say. Grief is strange. It doesn't come all at once. It leaks in through the cracks. The first time your name isn't on the birthday invite. The second chair left empty at Thanksgiving. The voicemail you listen to with the lights off. That's how grief works. Quiet, steady, like a leaking faucet in a house no one checks anymore. I thought about deleting it, about starting fresh. Clean slate, like people say. But I didn't. I saved that message. Not because I needed it, but because he needed me to remember it. To remember that maybe, just maybe, there was still a small, buried thread of the boy I once knew. I didn't call him back. Instead, I went out to the storage unit. Unit 17B, cold metal doors. Smelled like old rubber and cardboard. I hadn't been there in almost a year. It held pieces of the life I used to have. Carol's sewing table, my army footlocker, a busted lawnmower I swore I'd fix, and boxes of photographs too heavy to open. I sat down on an overturned bucket, dust dancing in the sunlight cutting through the crack in the door, and opened the footlocker. Inside, my old army tags, one of Carol's scarves still folded like it was waiting to be worn, and a photo. One I hadn't seen in over 20 years. It was me, Mark, and Carol, Thanksgiving 1998. Mark was 13, awkward haircut, braces, holding a turkey leg with one hand and flashing a crooked smile with the other. Carol was laughing at something off camera. I had my arm around both of them. That was the year we couldn't afford a real turkey, so I deep-fried a few legs and called it gourmet. We laughed about it for weeks. I remember Mark saying, "Best Thanksgiving ever." And that photo broke me, not loudly, not with tears or trembling fists, just quietly, like a branch giving way under snow. I sat there for an hour, maybe two, not thinking, just feeling. And I realized something. Mark's voicemail wasn't just about the check. It was about trying to reach something in himself he thought was gone. Maybe he didn't miss me. Maybe he missed who he used to be when he was with me. The boy who cared about birds and greasy hands and backyard camping trips. The boy who believed in his father. And maybe I missed that version of him too. But that didn't mean I was ready to pick up the pieces just because he dropped them. There's a myth people love to believe, that forgiveness is immediate, that all you need is one honest apology and everything resets. But real life doesn't work like that. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, takes time. Sometimes years, sometimes never. I've learned something in these months away from him. Boundaries are love. Sometimes staying away is the most loving thing you can do. For them and for yourself. I closed the footlocker, wiped the dust from the photo, and took it home with me. That night, I sat by the window, photo in my lap, a notebook beside me. I wrote down something Carol used to say, "Pride is heavy when it tries to wear grief as a disguise." Then I started writing again. This time not about money or land or what I could do with $2 million. I wrote about grace, about what it would look like to rebuild a relationship, not as a father hoping to be loved, but as a man with nothing to prove. I wrote that I would not give Mark another cent, not because he didn't need it, but because what he needed more was to walk through the fire and come out with something other than ash in his hands. He needed to face what he'd become, without bailouts, without shortcuts. But I also wrote that if he ever came to me, not for money, not for help, but just to sit, I'd leave a chair open. Just one. Not a table. Not a warm welcome back into the old family portrait. Just one chair. Simple. Quiet. Waiting. Because love, real love, doesn't slam the door. It just locks it and leaves the porch light on. The next morning, I went to the park near my apartment, sat on a bench, watched the kids run with sticky hands and skinned knees, watched old men throw breadcrumbs at birds, watched mothers scold and smile at the same time. And then I saw a man walk by with his son, maybe 5 years old, riding a red scooter. And I heard him say, "Be careful, buddy. I'm right behind you." That line punched the air out of my chest, because that's all I ever wanted Mark to feel, that I was behind him, not dragging him, not fixing him, just there, And maybe now he'd have to learn how to say that to his own son. Maybe that was the lesson, that some debts can't be paid with money, only with change. Real, hard, painful change. That afternoon, I replayed the voicemail again. Just once. Then I turned off the phone, and I sat in silence, not waiting for an answer. But finally, for the first time in years, at peace. I spoke to Carol today, not out loud at first, not like a man gone crazy, just in the way a memory presses against your chest when the world around you slows down enough for silence to speak. I hadn't visited her grave in almost a year, not because I forgot. I never forgot. But because I didn't know what I'd say. What do you tell the person who always saw you clearer than you saw yourself? What do you say when the one person who knew how to hold your heart in her hands isn't here to tell you what to do with it anymore? The cemetery sits on the edge of town, where the pine trees lean toward the sky like they're praying. I used to take Carol there before she passed. We'd walk between the rows, stopping at names we didn't know, whispering things like, "I wonder what kind of life this one had," as if death were just another version of someone's front porch. When she died, I chose the spot beneath the old oak tree, the one she always liked. She said it made her feel small in a good way, like she was part of something older than pain. I brought flowers, the kind she used to grow in the backyard, snapdragons and daffodils. She said they were the only ones brave enough to bloom without asking permission. I sat down beside the stone and placed the flowers gently, brushing off the leaves that had settled across her name. Carol Ann Harlan, beloved wife, quiet light in a loud world. That was my line, the last thing I ever wrote with meaning. I told her about the voicemail, about the check, about how Mark finally sounded like he was looking for something more than an excuse. I told her I didn't know if I believed him yet. That part was hard, admitting I wasn't sure if I could trust my own son ever again. I told her I didn't hate him, that I wanted to forgive him, but something in me, something proud and cracked and still bleeding, it kept pulling back. I sat there for over an hour, talking slow, not waiting for answers, just laying things out the way I used to when I came home from work and she'd be stirring soup, listening with her eyes more than her ears. I told her about the letter she left me, how it saved me, how it pulled me back from becoming someone I didn't recognize. And then I said something I'd never said to anyone, not even to myself. I said, "Carol, I'm scared. Scared that I've held on to the pain so long I don't know how to let go. Scared that maybe Mark inherited more of me than I wanted to believe. Scared that if I open the door again, he'll just walk through it and slam it behind me once more." I sat with that fear for a long time. Then I leaned back against the oak tree, looked up at the branches, and remembered something Carol used to say. She said, "The oak only looks strong because it bends. The ones that break are the ones that refuse to move." I closed my eyes and let those words sit with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd gotten so good at surviving that I'd forgotten how to bend. On the way home, I didn't turn on the radio, didn't call anyone. Just drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my leg like it used to when Carol would reach over and hold it at stoplights. Funny how some gestures leave phantom weight long after they're gone. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, not coffee. Carol always said I shouldn't drink coffee after 5 or I'd be up all night watching infomercials and yelling at the TV. I chuckled at that memory. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out that old photo again, the one from Thanksgiving, 1998. I stared at Mark's face. At mine, at hers. We looked happy, not perfect, but real. And then, for the first time in a long while, I said something out loud to the night. I said, "If he shows up, I won't turn him away." I didn't say I'd embrace him. Didn't say I'd open the floodgates and let all the years of silence melt into forgiveness. But I made a quiet promise to myself, and to the woman under the oak tree, that if he showed up, not as a beggar, not as a son with excuses, but as a man, I'd listen. The stars were out that night, faint, but steady. I sat there for a long time, the photo still in my lap, wondering if Mark felt any of this, if he was staring at a ceiling somewhere, wrestling with the same weight. And then, just before midnight, a text came through. No words, just a photo, a picture of his front porch, and beside the front door, a single empty chair. I stared at that photo for a long time. His porch hadn't changed much. Same chipped steps, same crooked welcome mat I gave him back when he and Lisa bought the house. The chair was plain. Worn wood. Looked like something pulled from the garage or maybe the backyard. But it sat there, angled slightly toward the door, like it wasn't just furniture, like it was an invitation. He didn't add any words to the message. No, I'm sorry. No, please come. Just that single image. That was the most honest thing Mark had done in years. And somehow, it said more than all the voicemails and apologies ever could. I didn't respond, not immediately. I needed to let it breathe, needed to sit with the feeling before I rushed in and called it forgiveness. I went inside, made coffee even though it was too late for it, and sat at the kitchen table with the photo still open on my phone. I thought about all the years between us, the dinners missed, the birthdays remembered late, the conversations we never finished because pride spoke louder than love. I thought about that Sunday I showed up at his house with my tool belt, ready to fix the broken deck, and he told me not to bother, said he'd call a real contractor. That one cut deeper than he knew, because being useful, that was how I showed love. Take that away from a man like me and you might as well tell him to stop breathing. And yet, here he was now, sending me a picture of an empty chair. I couldn't sleep that night. Got up around 3, walked the apartment barefoot, ran my hand along the wall like I was feeling for something I couldn't name. I opened Carol's letter again. Not to read it, I already knew it by heart, but just to hold it. Sometimes the weight of a thing reminds you it's still real. And I kept thinking about something she'd said years before she passed. We were watching a neighbor's kid throw a tantrum on the front lawn, and I made some comment about how spoiled kids were these days. Carol just looked at me and said, "When people act small, you get to decide whether to shrink with them or grow past them." I didn't understand it then, but I do now. The next morning I shaved, put on a clean shirt, took the long road through town, past the old church, past the hardware store where I bought Mark his first set of tools, past the school where he broke his wrist falling off the jungle gym and cried until I carried him home. I wasn't ready to knock on the door yet. Wasn't sure I would. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. Needed to see if that chair was still there. If the invitation was real, or just a moment of weakness. When I pulled up, the street was quiet. Kids were at school, lawns unmowed, mailboxes leaning like tired soldiers. And there it was, the porch, the door, and the chair, still sitting there, still angled toward the door. It wasn't some trick. It wasn't about money. It was a small, quiet olive branch. I sat in the truck for 10 minutes, maybe more, just watching, thinking, remembering. Then I got out, walked slow. My knees ached, but I didn't mind. Pain reminded me I was still in the world. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I just sat. The chair creaked under me, old wood adjusting to old weight. I looked around, wind rustling the leaves, a dog barking somewhere far off, the faint sound of a dishwasher running inside. And then, the door opened. Mark stepped out. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, one hand still on the knob, like he wasn't sure if this was a dream. He looked older, tired. Not the boy I raised. Not the man who kicked me out, but someone in between, someone humbled. Then he said quietly, "I didn't know if you'd come." I nodded, said nothing. He sat down beside me, in another chair I hadn't seen. Maybe he'd brought it out that morning. Maybe it had always been there, just never noticed. We sat like that for a while, 2 men with nothing left to prove, no script to follow, just present. The wind moved between us like a third voice. We didn't speak for a long time, but it wasn't awkward. It was honest. And in that silence, something old began to thaw. Finally, he said, "I didn't deserve that check. I know it. But I used it right. I caught up the mortgage. Lisa came back. I told her everything. I'm trying to do things different now." I nodded again, still silent, still listening. "I've been seeing a counselor," he added. Said I should start by reaching out to the people I've hurt. That one made me inhale slow. Mark, I said finally, if you're waiting for me to forget what happened, I won't. He looked down. I know. But if you're asking if I'm willing to see who you're becoming, then maybe. He let out a breath. Not relief, not celebration, but release. I stood up first, my knees cracking loud enough to make us both smile for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. He said, "Will you come by again sometime?" I looked at the chair, at him, then at the street behind me, and I said, "Maybe." Then I walked back to the truck, the sun hitting the side mirror just right. When I pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. He was still sitting there, not waiting, just sitting, and for the first time, that was enough. It had been 2 weeks since I sat on that porch, 2 weeks since I heard my son speak without anger in his voice, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a strange kind of quiet settle over me. Not peace, not yet, but quiet, like the stillness before a storm that you hope never comes. Mark had called once or twice since then, just to check in. Nothing heavy. He even invited me to dinner. I said no. I wasn't ready. But I didn't shut the door. That was the balance now. Not open arms, not closed fists, just space. One afternoon, I stopped by his house again. He wasn't home, but I needed to drop off a wrench he'd loaned me years ago. The one I never gave back because part of me still wanted to believe we were connected by something useful. Lisa answered the door. She looked surprised, but not unkind. Her tone had changed. Softer. She thanked me for the wrench, asked if I wanted to come in for a minute. I said sure. Just a minute. The house looked different. Cleaner. Calmer. Maybe people really do carry storms inside them, and when they calm down, everything else follows. We talked for a bit in the kitchen. She offered me tea. I accepted. Then her phone buzzed in the other room and she excused herself to take the call. I was left alone at the table. That's when I saw it. Just sitting there, half hidden under a stack of envelopes. A bank statement. Not unusual, but this one had the corner folded, and the part that was showing caught my eye. It had my name on it. That stopped me cold. I didn't reach for it, didn't snoop, but the top half was exposed, and what I could see, it didn't make sense. A wire transfer dated the week after I gave him the check. Not $2,143.18. This one was for $50,000. And it was from my account. My heart slowed, then sped up. A strange rhythm, like a truck engine misfiring. When Lisa came back, I kept calm, said thank you, walked out. But in my chest, something had already cracked open again. I drove home in silence, the way you drive after a funeral. I went straight to my files, opened my banking app, and stared. There it was. A transfer of $50,000 made 2 days after I met Mark at the diner. The note on it said, "Home repairs and support, approved." But I never made that transfer. I called the bank. Took me 20 minutes to get someone on the line. Another 10 for them to pull the file. "Yes, sir. The transfer was initiated from your secure online account using the mobile app." "I don't have a mobile app. I don't do banking on my phone." "But sir," she said, "it was authorized with your usual password and confirmed with the same security device you've used in the past." That's when it hit me. Mark must have had my login details. From when he helped me years ago set up automatic bill pay. Back when Carol was sick and I could barely focus. I trusted him. Of course I did. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been gutted without a knife. Was this whole performance a setup? Had he faked the tears, the voicemail, the empty chair, just to get access to more money? No, I didn't want to believe that. But $50,000 doesn't just disappear. I pulled out the photo of Thanksgiving again. That one snapshot that kept me grounded. The boy who once cried over a bird. The boy who sat on my lap and asked me how engines worked. What happened to that boy? The doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. Let it ring twice more. When I opened it, Mark was standing there. He was holding something behind his back. "I was just about to call you," he said. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. Quiet. Cold. He handed me a small box. Inside was a framed photo, the one from Thanksgiving. He'd found the original, had it restored. The colors were brighter, the edges sharp. He said, "I wanted you to have the real one." I stared at it, then at him. I said, "Mark, did you transfer money from my account?" His face changed, not surprised, just still. "What are you talking about?" he asked. $50,000, 2 days after the diner, from my account, through the app. His mouth opened, closed, and then, the smallest thing, he blinked. Not once, but twice. That fast blink people do when they're about to lie. I held up the bank printout, said nothing. He looked at it, then at me, and what he said next, it changed everything. He looked at the paper in my hand, then looked back at me. His eyes searched my face for some kind of opening, a crack, a softness, anything that might let him off the hook. But I stood still, and he knew. That fast blink, that slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, and the way he exhaled through his nose like a man who had already accepted the verdict, it was all there. He didn't even try to deny it, not really. He just said, "I needed it, Dad. I swear I was going to pay it back. I just didn't know how to ask." I sat down slowly, the weight of the frame in my hands, feeling heavier than glass, or wood had any right to feel. My thumb traced the edge of the photo. The bright new version of an old life, a version he had polished, restored, like he could fix the past if he just made it look pretty enough. But you can't restore trust with a gift, not when the wound's still fresh, not when the person holding the frame is still bleeding. I looked up at him, and for the first time in a long while, I saw him as both the boy and the man. The boy who once believed I could fix anything. The man who now believed he could take anything. And somewhere between those two, there was a truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. I cleared my throat and said, "Sit down." He did, slowly, like he wasn't sure if this was mercy or sentencing. I told him everything. About the land I bought all those years ago, the junkyard, the tech company, the wire transfers, the cashier's checks still locked in a drawer, the full $2 million. His mouth dropped open, but I didn't pause. I told him that when he pushed me out of the house, when he left me standing on that porch with nothing but a suitcase and a mug, I already had the money. I had it then. I had it now. I told him I waited to see who he was when he thought I had nothing. And now I knew. He didn't speak, not at first, just stared at me, stunned. Then came the tears, and I let him cry. Not out of pity, but because some lessons only sink in when they hit bottom. He begged, said he was sorry, said he wasn't thinking straight, that it was pressure, that it was Lisa, that it was fear, that it was always something else. But I raised my hand and said, "Enough. This isn't about the money, it never was." He looked confused, desperate to rewind everything, to start over. I shook my head. "You didn't just take money, Mark. You took dignity. You broke trust. You looked your own father in the eye and decided I didn't matter." He collapsed into the chair across from me, hands in his hair, rocking like a man who just realized the road ahead doesn't lead where he thought it did. I leaned forward, rested my elbows on my knees, and said something I had rehearsed for months, but never thought I'd actually say. "You're not in my will anymore." His head snapped up, his face pale. "What?" I looked him in the eyes. "I rewrote it, weeks ago, before the check, before the voicemail, before the chair on the porch. I changed everything." He stammered, tried to argue, tried to beg, but I cut him off. "This isn't punishment. It's protection. For me, for what I built, for the kind of man I used to be, and maybe to give you a chance to become one too, without leaning on what you didn't earn." He sat there speechless, and I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, looked out the window at the fading sun. "I'll help you," I said, still looking outside. "Not with money, not with favors, but I'll be here. If you want to talk, if you want to work, if you want to rebuild, I'll be here. But I won't rescue you. You have to rescue yourself now." He didn't say anything, just wiped his face and nodded. And in that nod, I saw something different. Maybe not understanding, maybe not peace, but surrender, the first crack in the armor of entitlement he'd worn for too long. He left quietly, holding the frame against his chest, like it was the last thing he had left of me. And maybe it was. That night, I sat back on the porch with my old mug in hand. The wind was calm. The world didn't feel heavier than usual. It just felt right. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies carved into stone. What I needed was what I'd finally found. The strength to love without losing myself. The power to forgive without forgetting. The courage to walk away without slamming the door. If you've ever been pushed aside by someone you raised, if you've ever been made to feel like you were just a burden, I want you to know something. Your value isn't in what they see. It's in what you are. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not strike back, but stand still and tell the truth. With your eyes, with your spine, with your silence. And maybe that's what this story was always about. Not the money. Not even the betrayal. But the quiet kind of justice that comes when you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own father, your own pain, your own dignity, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me who you are. Because I may be old, but I still believe in second chances. I still believe in stories that heal. And if you're still here, maybe you do too.